Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to try to do this video as fast as I can to encourage those of you that are still afraid of pressure canning to go ahead and give it a try. This, in my opinion, is the very easiest thing to pressure can, and that is meat. And what we're going to need is meat, all right? This is ground beef. It comes out great when you pressure can it using the raw pack method, meaning that this is not cooked meat. This is either the raw pack method or the cold pack method. I like to use a little bit of salt, although you don't need it. You're going to need a funnel for your jar. And of course, you can see here I have 7 jars, which is what my pressure canner takes. It takes 7 full quart jars. I also use this dough roller without the handles so that I can compress the meat down into the jar. So the first step is, let's get our meat in the jars. Now, once you get all your meat in the jars, all you're going to do, ladies and gentlemen, is add a little bit of salt. I usually add about a teaspoon for a quart-sized jar, and I add a half of a teaspoon for a pint-sized jar. Now, let me go ahead and do the rest of these jars, and we'll take it to the next step. All right, I got them all full, and I got salt on all of them. Now I'm going to go ahead and clean the rim on each jar. Very important that you do this. Now that I wipe down all my jar rims, I'm going to go ahead and wipe it down again with some white vinegar. This is just a way of sanitizing your rim. Now, while I've been doing this, I've had my lids in a pot getting warmed up. I understand that Ball now says that you don't have to heat up your lids prior to putting them on the jars. However, I decide to do that because it gives me a nice, warm, and fuzzy feeling inside when I do. And now that my lids are out of the pot, I'm going to go ahead and put a lid on centered. I'm going to grab my ring. I'm going to put my finger through here. Put my ring on until I can no longer turn it with one finger. Then I'm going to give it about 1/3 of a turn or so. Maybe 1/4 of a turn. You do that with all of them, and now these are ready to go in the pressure canner. Now, this is our experiment jar, ladies and gentlemen. I've always heard by many people on the internet that you want to make sure that when you pack your jars, that there are no air gaps. Well, I didn't have enough meat to completely pack this jar down, and I believe that the air gaps when you are pressure canning do not really make a big difference as long as you allow your pressure canner to depressurize naturally. So we're going to see what happens with this jar. Now let's go to our pressure canner. As you can see, I already have some water in my canner, and this canner is rated for 3/4 of a gallon of water. Now, the rule of thumb that I use is I always make sure that when I finish putting in all of my jars, that my jars are not more than half up with the water level, meaning that the water level is not more than half off. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so make sure that you double check that. However, check the owner's manual for your canner in case you have a different model than mine. I have the T-Fall 22 quart canner, and I love this canner. It's very easy to use. Now that I've got all of my jars in there, you'll be able to see that there's definitely not enough water in there. You want to make sure you add enough water because you don't want to run this canner dry. It will ruin it and more than likely crack all of your jars in there. So I'm going to go ahead and put in the rest of my water and see where we're at once I put in my last jar. You may not be able to see it, but I'll let you know. And that is definitely at least 1/3 up, a little more than 1/3. This is good to go. Now all we have to do is put on our lid. Now that my lid is on, let me go and explain to you how this pressure canner works. Like I said, I haven't seen another one like it because it comes with what I like to call a mechanical weight. Obviously, you have your gauge right here, your pressure gauge. You have your mechanical weight, and there is a safety here that in case it gets too much pressure in there and nothing is working, it will let air out of here or steam out of here. Now, the way that the mechanical weight works is you have an open position. You have the 5-pound position on number 1, the 10-pound on number 2, 15 pounds of pressure on number 3. I always use 15 pounds of pressure no matter where I'm at because, again, it gives me a nice warm and fuzzy, and I've always had great luck with it. Everything's always come out good. I've never lost a jar because of it. Where I'm at, I'm only rated to use 10 pounds of pressure, but like I said, I use 15 pounds of pressure, and instead of allowing this to run for 90 minutes for a quart jar of protein or 75 minutes for a pint jar of protein, I always give it an extra 5 minutes. So when I set this to run for its final stage, I will set it for 95 minutes on my timer. However, what we want to do now is we want to turn the burner on. One thing that I forgot to mention is that when you put your water in there, make sure that that water is cold. Why? Because you're putting cold jars in there. You're doing the cold pack method or the raw pack method, which means that your meat is going to be pretty chilly. So you don't want to introduce a cold jar to hot water. You go ahead and put it in there cold along with your jars. And then you go ahead and turn on your stove, and then you go ahead and let it start steaming. We'll be back when this starts steaming. That way you see what it looks like. And there's something that you need to know about this as well, as far as how long to let it run while it's steaming out this hole right here. Now that you have fast steam coming out of your hole here, you're going to set your timer for 10 minutes. And then after the 10 minutes is over, you will come back and you will set your weight. Now that 10 minutes has passed, I'm going to go ahead and bring this all the way to 15 pounds. And I'm going to wait until it gets to 10 pounds of pressure. Once it gets to 10 pounds of pressure, I am going to go ahead and set my timer for 10 minutes. Now I set my timer for 10 minutes. Once the timer goes off, all we have to do is make sure that we maintain above 10 pounds of pressure for the next 90 minutes. As you can see, it has settled down to about 10.5 pounds, which is just right. I know this canner very well, and I know, by the way, I've already pushed it on over to the smallest burner on the stove. And like I said, I know this canner very well, and I know that it will not go, it won't even touch that 10-pound mark anymore. Okay, and I will actually have to come back here and adjust the flame down just a little bit, because it will start to go all the way back up to where it starts to reach overpressure. So I have to bring the flame back down just a little bit, but I'll just keep my eye on it. We are done, ladies and gentlemen. All I need to do now is turn off the burner. It is completely off, and I will let it naturally depressurize, meaning that I'm not going to assist it by moving my weight up or taking your weight off if you have an actual weighted pressure canner. I'm just going to let it do it naturally. However, let me warn you that once it's depressurized, once it's at zero, we're going to take it out of there. I'm not going to let this thing sit in there like overnight or all day. I forget what the name is, but if you let the meat sit in there at a really warm temperature for like several hours, it can sour the meat, meaning that it won't grow bacteria to where it will hurt you, but it will taste really bad. So we want to get it out of there as soon as it's naturally depressurized, and then put it on the counter where it can finish processing overnight. All right, ladies and gentlemen, you see that is at zero. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and bring it all the way to the open. And if I hear anything leaking out of here when I bring it all the way to the open, I'll close it right back up and wait another 10 or 15 minutes. And there you go. That means that there is absolutely no pressure in there whatsoever. So now I'm just going to go ahead and open it up, and I'm going to start placing my jars on a towel that I have over here. Let me show you. Now this is a tool that I forgot to tell you that you were going to need. And this is what's used in order to pick the jars up from the pressure canner to bring it over here. And that's the jar right there that wasn't completely full and full of gaps. As you can see, to me it looks pretty good, but we will bring you back tomorrow morning after they set here for at least a good 12 to 18 hours. You don't want to touch them once you take them out for at least 12 to 18 hours. And also you want to make sure that whenever you set them down, that you put them on a towel or on a surface that doesn't keep any cold in it. Like, for example, this countertop right here is pretty chilly to the touch. You don't want to introduce a really hot jar to a chilly or cold surface. because the difference in temperature could crack the jar. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's been about 12 hours since we took these out of the pressure canner, and I wanted to show you one of the ways that I test that it's ready to go, that you can actually go ahead and wash the jars and label them and put them away. I go to each jar, and let me explain to you first really quick. When the temperature inside of the jar equalizes to the ambient temperature outside here, then that means that there should be no more positive pressure on this lid, meaning that it created a tight seal. So now the rings, you should be able to twist off the rings with just 2 fingers. Okay, it shouldn't be hard to twist off the rings. So I go to each jar, and some of them might be a little bit taut, but they shouldn't be like really tight. So let's see if you can see it really good here. There you go, you see that? They should easily come, and this should work for you. This is a good indication that these jars are very well sealed and that they have finished processing. See that? And let me go ahead and show you the jar that wasn't full all the way. Look at that. It worked out. Now what will happen is since most of that fat is right here and there's some meat on top of it, over time that meat on top, it will dry out a little bit. But I'll tell you what, I've never had any problem with any of that meat, even if it dried out a little bit after I reopened the jar and used the meat, with it being bad. It might get a little bit darker or something in color than this meat here because it's still submerged in liquid, but there won't be anything wrong with consuming that meat at all. Alright, I hope that you got something out of this, ladies and gentlemen. If you haven't started pressure canning, give it a try. There are still some meats that are worth pressure canning. In my opinion, hamburger, if you get it at a decent price, is worth pressure canning. Beef, not so much because of the price. You know, like if you go and get stew meat, which is great for pressure canning, not so much given the price that you buy it in the raw form, because you can buy canned meat for around the same price. Same thing with chicken. But depending where you live and depending the prices that you pay for your meats in the raw form, in my opinion, would depend on whether it's worth pressure canning it or not. And as I stated before, this ground beef that you pressure can is great for making spaghettis, for making tacos, for making lasagna, things like that. So it's got many uses. You can also do a dish where you put this ground beef and cook it with rice and spices. It comes out great. Having said that, remember to be good to each other. When good people do good things happen. Remember to reach one, teach one, and repeat. If we all did this, the world would be a better place, and you know that it will be a better place. Many blessings to all of you and your families. I'm Alaska Prepper, and I'm out.